Chapter 46. Several days had passed since her futile journey, and Tess was afield. The dry winter wind still blew, but a screen of thatched hurdles erected in the eye of the blast kept its force away from her. On the sheltered side was a turnip-slicing machine, whose bright blue hue of new paint seemed almost vocal in the otherwise subdued scene. Opposite its front was a long mound or grave, in which the roots had been preserved since early winter. Tess was standing at the uncovered end, chopping off with a billhook the fibres and earth from each root, and throwing it after the operation into the slicer. A man was turning the handle of the machine, and from its trough came the newly cut swedes, the fresh smell of whose yellow chips was accompanied by the sounds of the snuffling wind, the smart swish of the slicing blades, and the choppings of the hook in Tess's leather-gloved hand. The wide acreage of blank agricultural brownness, apparent where the swedes had been pulled, was beginning to be striped in wales of darker brown, gradually broadening to ribbons. Along the edge of each of these something crept upon 10 legs, moving without haste and without rest up and down the whole length of the field. It was 2 horses and a man, the plough going between them, turning up the cleared ground for a spring sowing. For hours nothing relieved the joyless monotony of things. Then, far beyond the ploughing teams, a black speck was seen. It had come from the corner of a fence where there was a gap, and its tendency was up the incline towards the swede cutters. From the proportions of a mere point it advanced to the shape of a 9-pin, and was soon perceived to be a man in black, arriving from the direction of Flintcomb Ash. The man at the slicer, having nothing else to do with his eyes, continually observed the comer, but Tess, who was occupied, did not perceive him till her companion directed her attention to his approach. It was not her hard taskmaster, Farmer Groby. It was one in a semi-clerical costume, who now represented what had once been the free and easy Alec d'Urberville. Not being hot at his preaching, there was less enthusiasm about him now, and the presence of the grinder seemed to embarrass him. A pale distress was already on Tess's face, and she pulled her curtained hood further over it. D'Urberville came up and said quietly, "I want to speak to you, Tess." "You have refused my last request not to come near me," said she. "Yes, but I have a good reason." "Well, tell it." "It is more serious than you may think." He glanced round to see if he were overheard. They were at some distance from the man who turned the slicer, and the movement of the machine, too, sufficiently prevented Alec's words reaching other ears. D'Urberville placed himself so as to screen Tess from the labourer, turning his back to the latter. "It is this," he continued with capricious compunction. "In thinking of your soul and mine when we last met, I neglected to inquire as to your worldly condition. You were well dressed, and I did not think of it. But I see now that it is hard, harder than it used to be when I knew you, harder than you deserve. Perhaps a good deal of it is owing to me." She did not answer, and he watched her inquiringly as, with bent head, her face completely screened by the hood, she resumed her trimming of the swedes. By going on with her work she felt better able to keep him outside her emotions. "Tess," he added with a sigh of discontent, "yours was the very worst case I was ever concerned in. I had no idea of what had resulted till you told me. Scamp that I was to foul that innocent life! The whole blame was mine, the whole unconventional business of our time at Trantridge. You, too, the real blood of which I am but a base imitation, what a blind young thing you were as to possibilities! I say in all earnestness that it is a shame for parents to bring up their girls in such dangerous ignorance of the gins and nets that the wicked may set for them, whether their motive be a good one or the result of simple indifference." Tess still did no more than listen, throwing down one globular root and taking up another with automatic regularity, the pensive contour of the mere field woman alone marking her. "But it is not that I came to say," d'Urberville went on. "My circumstances are these. I have lost my mother since you were at Trantridge, and the place is my own, but I intend to sell it and devote myself to missionary work in Africa. A devil of a poor hand I shall make at the trade, no doubt. However, what I want to ask you is, will you put it in my power to do my duty, to make the only reparation I can make for the trick I played you? That is, will you be my wife and go with me? I have already obtained this precious document. It was my old mother's dying wish." He drew a piece of parchment from his pocket with a slight fumbling of embarrassment. "What is it?" said she. "A marriage licence." "Oh, no, sir, no," she said quickly, starting back. "You will not? Why is that?" As he asked the question, a disappointment which was not entirely the disappointment of thwarted duty crossed d'Urberville's face. It was unmistakably a symptom that something of his old passion for her had been revived. Duty and desire ran hand in hand. "Surely," he began again in more impetuous tones, and then looked round at the labourer, who turned the slicer. Tess, too, felt that the argument could not be ended there. Informing the man that a gentleman had come to see her, with whom she wished to walk a little way, she moved off with d'Urberville across the zebra-striped field. When they reached the first newly ploughed section, he held out his hand to help her over it, and she stepped forward on the summits of the earth rolls as if she did not see him. "You will not marry me, Tess, and make me a self-respecting man?" he repeated, as soon as they were over the furrows. "I cannot." "But why?" "You know I have no affection for you." "But you would get to feel that in time, perhaps, as soon as you really could forgive me?" "Never." "Why so positive?" "I love somebody else." The words seemed to astonish him. "You do?" he cried. "Somebody else? But has not a sense of what is morally right and proper any weight with you?" "No, no, no, don't say that." "Anyhow, then, your love for this other man may only be a passing feeling which you will overcome." "No, no." "Yes, yes, why not?" "I cannot tell you." "You must, in honour." "Well, then, I have married him." "Ah!" he exclaimed, and he stopped dead and gazed at her. "I did not wish to tell. I did not mean to," she pleaded. "It is a secret here, or at any rate but dimly known. So will you, please, will you, keep from questioning me? You must remember that we are now strangers." "Strangers, are we? Strangers?" For a moment a flash of his old irony marked his face, but he determinedly chastened it down. "Is that man your husband?" he asked mechanically, denoting by a sign the labourer who turned the machine. "That man?" she said proudly. "I should think not." "Who then?" "Do not ask what I do not wish to tell," she begged, and flashed her appeal to him from her upturned face and lash-shadowed eyes.